Welcome to Live the Dream with yours truly, Marty Kaiser. Buckle up and let's get started. Happy Friday, everyone. This is Marty Kaiser with our Friday Real Estate Tidbits. Hopefully everyone is doing well and enjoying our great Florida weather. Take advantage of it because it is supposed to get somewhat colder next week. I did want to go over a couple things today. One of the things that's come up in a few interactions I've had recently, and I thought it would be a great topic to discuss, is what we call contingencies in a real estate contract. How they should be used, why or why not should they be used, and some misunderstandings of contingencies, both by buyers and sometimes the real estate agents. I know you're probably scratching your head and saying real estate agents, but I think some real estate agents don't really understand the psychologies of using or not using certain components in a contract, how they can affect the contract, and how they can actually penalize their customer. And I think a lot of that is because some of our newer age real estate agents, they're great with technology, but they're not really overly effective in communicating to their consumers what are the best practices to put the consumer in the most advantageous position. And I think a lot of them, before they start showing properties, haven't sufficiently developed a relationship and going through a lot of the information and components that buyers would be highly beneficial from prior to looking at properties. And let me give you a couple examples of some situations that we've run into recently. On a few of our listings, we've had some inquiries, either from realtors on behalf of a customer or the customer themselves that are currently not represented by a realtor. So let me go through the scenario first when a realtor contacts us. So they call us and they say, "Hey, Marty, this is Joe Smith with ABC Realty, and I'm interested in showing your home at 123 Main Street." So you go into a little bit of information about the home. You explain to them how they access the home. And then in many instances, you try to ask them a little information about their customer. You know, does the customer, are they already pre-approved, which obviously they should be before they view a home? Do they have to sell anything prior to purchasing in order to qualify for the purchase? Some pretty specific, but at the same time, pretty basic questions. So a few of the scenarios we've run into recently, their customer has to sell a home, number one, but they want to start looking before they do anything with their home. But more importantly, those homes in the situations that I'm referencing are not currently on the market. So they're going to look at a home, and let's say they like your home. So the next thing they want to do, based on what information we've been able to derive from their agent, is they want to write an offer on your home contingent on selling your home. So think about that from the seller's perspective. Somebody makes an offer on your home, so they want to place a contingency in the contract that says the purchase of your home is contingent on me selling my residence in ABC Street. So as a seller, if that was the way the offer was structured, the seller would have complete ambiguity, no certainty, meaning that they tie up their property while the buyer is trying to sell their home. So there's no advantage to the seller in that situation. And unless we're in a severely depressed market where it's hard to find buyers, there is absolutely no benefit to the seller accepting that type of offer. If the seller was going to consider that offer, probably the most they would do is they might say, okay, we'll consider accepting your contingency, but we would place in the contract a 48-hour first right of refusal. And what that terminology means is that if you get a second offer on your home while it's contingent with that first buyer, and the second offer is one that you can strike an arrangement with the second buyer, you then go back to the first buyer and say, we have another offer that we're going to accept unless you can remove your contingency. And that has to be an unconditional removal of the contingency relative to the sale of any property. And of course, we would have to re-verify with their lender that they can in fact move forward and secure the financing without selling their home. So that's, for a lot of people, that's a pretty large hurdle to overcome. But the main reason that I'm mentioning this today is if you're a customer, you need to get that house on the market first before you even consider looking at homes, in my opinion. Because think about it. If a seller was vaguely going to consider giving you that type of broad contingency, the first question that would be asked of you, well, how long has your house been on the market for? Well, it's not on the market yet. We're going to put it on the market. So from the seller's point of view, there is absolutely no reason to go any further in the discussion because, number one, they don't even have their house on the market. Number two, if the house was on the market, before I can adequately advise my seller, I have to do my due diligence on their house and see how reasonably it's priced. Is it probable that that house is going to sell quickly? How active is their neighborhood? How well does their house present itself? Different variables of that nature. But my advice to any buyer in that situation is you need to put your house on the market first before you're going to even contemplate seriously looking at homes. And secondly, your position's going to be much stronger is it when you start looking at homes and let's say you're contemplating writing an offer and it's contingent on you selling your home, that your home has gone under contract. So then there's a greater probability that your home is going to sell, and there's a timeline. So we can investigate your transaction relative to when it's supposed to close per your contract. We can also investigate, has your inspection been done? Has the inspection been approved? So we can come up with a scenario to determine how likely it is that your house is going to successfully sell. And if it looks like everything's moving forward in your transaction, our seller is more likely to work with you and accept that contingency. But I can't stress enough how crucial it would be for you to get that house on the market first. I kind of scratched my head because I've had a few of these inquiries recently, why a person thinks that a seller would consider their offer and their house isn't even for sale. They're pretty much wasting their time in 99.9% of the situations. So I can't strongly advise enough to buyers, if you have to sell something, get your house on the market. And I know some buyers will say, well, I don't want to get a contract on my house without securing another house to buy. But unfortunately, if you need to sell to buy, I don't think you have any other realistic contingency. What's the worst thing that can happen if you obligate yourself to sell a house and then you can't find another house that you're comfortable enough with to pursue that? Well, worst case scenario, then you'd rent something in the interval. I know a consumer would rather not move twice, but it is an alternative if for some reason you can't line up the timing of the two transactions. I know some of the sellers in these scenarios have contemplated calling third-party companies like Open Door and OfferPad, companies of that nature, because they'll give you a guaranteed cash offer and you can control your closing date. And assuming everything works out with those entities, that seems like a good alternative for sellers. And for some sellers, it may be. The problem is, even though those companies are reputable, they're not going to pay you market value for your home. So you can anticipate in almost all cases, if you get an offer from one of those entities, it's going to be significantly below what the market would generate for your home. So in that scenario, you have to decide, well, how much of a discount is worth the guarantee of me putting these two transactions together in a smoother, stress-free manner? For example, and I can't give you exact prices, but let's say you have a house that you need to sell that's worth $500,000, and you're soliciting a cash offer from one of these two entities. The likelihood is it's going to be 10 to 20% below market value. So you have to decide what type of discount you're willing to give, and can you part with that much equity when you're wanting to buy your next home? I know I've had several customers have told me, well, let's solicit a cash offer from one of these entities. So we can do that with no problem. We can represent our seller. The sellers are not at any obligation or risk. And, we put together a nice offer package and then send it into one of these entities, and we see what they offer. But so far, all the times that I was requested to do that by my sellers, the prices were not sufficient for the sellers to take action, so we sold them through traditional methods, as I'm mentioning. And we've always been successful in generating a very solid price for our sellers. But there are other alternatives to consider if you're faced with that choice. But I cannot strongly, again, recommend enough that buyers need to get their house on the market. But prior to undertaking those activities, in my opinion, it's imperative that you go through a comprehensive consultation with the agent or agents that you're considering hiring to help assist you in your real estate needs. It's a sharing of information. It'll also give you a pretty good idea of the skill level of the agent that you're considering hiring. It's going to answer a lot of your questions. It's going to give you a specific blueprint on what to follow. And then you'll be able to make a much more informed decision. For example, let's use the scenario where you're needing to sell in order to buy. Okay, and you're going to have the same agent help you with both transactions. So you have two sides to that coin. First, if you can think of this, you're going to interview the agent from a seller's standpoint. So some of the questions you may ask the agent: how long have you been selling homes in this area? How many homes have you actually sold? What should I expect in terms of how much off the asking price would you expect that I'll sell my home for, what they call the typical average list to sale ratio? How long does it normally take you to sell homes in the neighborhood? And then maybe you'll proceed forward with, you want to discuss not only what the agent thinks you should sell your home for, but how the agent arrived at that price, and they should have detailed information about that. And you may have other questions about that, like, for example, why is my home worth more or less than some of the other homes you're showing me? And then you're going to want to see, what is the agent actually going to do to sell your home? Like, how will they market your home? What type of photography they're going to undertake on your behalf? Do they include drone views in their photography? What is their strategy for attracting customers? Do they expect the customers to be from out of Florida? Do they expect them to be move-up buyers in Florida? Do they expect them to be international customers? So these are just some of the things that you want to discuss with an agent before you make a selection of which agent should sell your home. And there's plenty of other things, but I don't want to go into complete detail in this podcast because it can take a while. So now switch hats and now put your buyer's hat on. So let's just say hypothetically, you've got a couple of neighborhoods that you want to focus in on. Maybe you want to focus in on, as you know, I do a lot of business in Hunters Creek, or maybe you want to focus in on several selected neighborhoods in Dr. Phillips, or possibly Windermere. So you let your agent know which neighborhoods you're most interested in, and then you want to ask some statistical as well as informative questions. For example, how many homes are for sale in that neighborhood right now? Is that neighborhood a strong selling neighborhood or kind of mediocre? Meaning that what's the ratio of homes selling versus how many homes are on the market, a term that we use in the industry called an absorption rate. What are the trends in that neighborhood? Are the prices going up, down, staying the same? You might ask questions about the school system. Then you might ask some questions about how long are homes typically taking to sell in that neighborhood. If I buy in that neighborhood, what do you think of that neighborhood as an investment vehicle? Has that neighborhood typically had a good trend for the prices continually going up? Or are there some areas nearby that you think might be better investments? And these are just, again, some very brief questions. I mean, again, interviewing a buyer's agent is much more involved as well. And of course, if you haven't already gotten yourself pre-approved, that's a crucial component before you start doing any home searching. And with the pre-approval process, does your agent recommend lenders that they have had a good experience with? And if so, why has their experience been good? Or have you already talked with a lender? And there's a lot of lenders out there, and like any other industry, home inspections, real estate agents, lenders, there's some excellent people in that field, and there's some not so great people in that field. What do I look for in my lenders? Number one, that they perform as promised. If they tell me they're going to complete a task on behalf of a seller and get them approved, they're going to do that, and hopefully with a minimum of stress. Is that lender organized? Does that lender effectively communicate? Does that lender get the job done within the time frame they project? Are their fees competitive? Can they be reached in off hours if you have questions? These are some of the things that I look for in my lenders. And if I'm going to recommend a lender to a customer, I want to have 110% confidence in them. So that's why my recommendations are based on a lot of historical experience as well as doing my due diligence on the lender. And the thing that I always make sure is that I have no conflict of interest. I get no benefits from that lender whatsoever other than getting a skilled lender to work on your behalf. But the pre-approval process when you're a buyer is so crucial. It really is. And nobody's going to take you really seriously if you're not pre-approved. And from the same token, from your perspective, you want to get pre-approved simply because you want to know exactly what your purchasing power is. So there's a lot of components to this whole process. So we start off with contingencies, and then we morph that into making the realtor selection. So hopefully that gave you a little better insight into some of the components that someone should have when they're considering selling and or buying, or just selling by itself or buying by itself. So anyway, give some thought to that. If anybody has any questions they'd like to contact me about further, again, this is Marty Kaiser with Better Homes and Gardens. I can be reached at 407-595-9700. And I can pretty much always be reached by text or phone unless I'm on an appointment. I always answer my phones because I think accessibility is important in this industry. So that's all for today. Have a great weekend, and this is Marty Kaiser out.